What is going on, guys? In today's video I will show you the top 3 best builds in POE2 Exile's 2 new update, the Rise of the Abyssal. So in this guide I will give you a quick overview of each setup, then I will explain what skill gems and upgrades should you focus on, then as well we'll see what is the best gear and how to get it, and then finally we will go over the passive tree, stats, your skill rotations, and even what Atlas passive should you use, so we would be able to get the highest damage possible and much more. And remember, if you want to check these builds, look up the best items, the skill trees, and POE2 building, then check my links in the description. If you ever played POE2 Exile 2 for long enough, then you know that the grind for currency can feel endless, and that's where today's sponsor comes in. Skycoach is a trusted platform used by over 150,000 gamers worldwide. They offer pro player support in more than top 25 games, including POE2. No matter if you need a faster start, you want to help with the tough content, or just want currency delivered safely and quickly, then Skycoach has you covered. What I really like is how smooth the whole process is, from click to the gameplay in minutes, clear and fast chats with their team, plus if an order is not fulfilled you get an instant refund. I've tried it myself and honestly it just makes the game more fun. So if you want to skip the grind and enjoy POE2 your way, then click my link in the description to check out Skycoach and use my code KATE for extra 10% off. This setup takes everything that people love about the lightning arrow meta build and flips it into the cold based monster that freezes, shatters, and absolutely demolishes maps at the lightning speed. In patch 0.3, the cold bow skills and the deadeye both received huge buffs, and when you put those two things together, then you will get a build that doesn't just clear screens, it destroys them before enemies even have a chance to move. For map clearing, the eye shot is your powerhouse. With the right support gems, the projectile train across the screen, and spreading the chill ground and freezing everything in their path, the monster groups just don't die, they explode in a cascade of shatters, and the Herald of the Ice stacks, by leaving nothing behind. And when it's time for bosses, then you bring out the lightning rod, the orb of storms, and the snipe, while stacking freezing effects that keep them locked down. The fact that you can do both, so clear like a speed demon and take down endgame encounters, makes this build incredibly versatile. So now let's break down the most important skill gems. At its core, we are centering everything around the Ice Shot. This is your main clearing ability, and the bread and butter skill that carries the build. When you fire the Ice Shot, the projectile not only deals direct cold damage, but also creates a chilling ground behind it, which slows enemies, and stacks freeze effects across the map. Then the ice-tapped arrows are the best perfect secondary skill, by providing additional cold damage while stacking freeze and the blind effects on tougher enemies. This not only boosts your crowd control, but also makes enemies more vulnerable to your other abilities. When you combine the ice tap arrows with the chilling ground from the ice shot, as they're unable to respond before you shatter them, then the freezing salvo is where the things get spicy. This skill adds a huge cold projectile damage and is perfect for both AoV and single target scenarios, supported by the hourglass for the cooldown manipulation and the cold penetration for breaking through the resistances. The freezing salvo ensures that bosses and elite monsters can hide behind high defenses. When you drop this on top of a pack, you're guaranteed an icy explosion of the dead. For debuffs, we are running the Frost Bomb. This applies the cold exposure, which makes enemies take significantly more cold damage. With the potent exposure and the magnified aerial support, your Frost Bombs become larger and more consistent source of vulnerability for the enemies. Dropping this before a boss fight will set you up for a massive burst damage. Then Herald of the Ice is where the clear speed really goes over the top. Every time you freeze and shatter an enemy, it causes icy explosions that chain through the pack. Combine that with your ice shot chaining, and suddenly every screen turns into a chain reaction of freezing detonations. The Herald is supported with the Overleech, the Cold Entombment, and Elemental Armament, which all amplify your scaling and consistency. And then finally, for single target nukes, you will be using the Snipe. This is your big high damage channel skill that absolutely melts bosses in seconds. Next up, moving over to the passive tree, and this is where you really transform the Ice Shot Deadeye into an unstoppable force. The core psychology of the tree is simple: maximize cold damage, maximize projectile scaling, and add enough defenses so you don't get one shot. From the beginning, you will branch into projectile damage, bow attack speed, and the crit multipliers. These are the bread and butter for any bow build, and they make the ice shot scale beautifully. You also want to invest into the clusters that enhance the cold damage specifically, so things like the cold penetration, freeze duration, and the cold exposure. This ensures that not only do you hit hard, but enemies stay frozen long enough for you to capitalize. Then defensively, you're investing into the evasion and life, which naturally synergizes with the ranger's playstyle. With the high evasion evasion, mobility, and the Wind Dancer keystone, you can avoid the majority of incoming damage. The build plays the best when you're constantly moving, so these defenses will line up perfectly with your natural gameplay. Then Javel sockets are another important aspect of the tree. These will give you flexibility, so early on you can grab resistances or mana sustain, and then later you can swap in the pure gems with the projectile multipliers, crit chance and attack speed. On Javels, your priority should be on mana kill, as it smooths out early sustain problems. Then next up we have gear, which is always a big one, so let's break it down. Your number one priority is your bow. This build scales insanely well with the weapon quality, so the stronger your bow, the better everything feels. Look for a high base DPS bow with an added cold damage, added physical damage, and ideally plus levels to projectile gems. A Gemini base is a fantastic starting point. If you can find a bow with a crit chance as well, then that's where your damage really starts to explode. For your quiver, you wanna focus on the flat damage, attack speed, and projectile modifiers. Then mana on kill is amazing bonus here, by smoothing out sustain early. Then projectile speed also makes the ice shot feel cleaner. Then for your gloves and ring, you should prioritize the flat cold damage, resistances, and attack speed. Rings with the added physical or the cold damage to attacks are especially valuable. Your amulet is a great place to grab levels to bow or projectile gems, as well as critical strike multipliers. Later on, anointing a damage node like the serrated edges can push your damage even further. Then defensively, we focus on high evasion gear for your chest and the boots. Resistances should always be capped at 75%, and movement speed on the boots make the build feel much smoother. The Javels are where you round everything out. You want mana on kill, which is a must-have, and after that prioritize attack speed, cold damage, crit multipliers, and projectile damage. Overall, the gear progression is simple. Upgrade your bow first, then cap resistances and scale evasion, and finally min-max your accessories. And now last but not least, let me show you the gameplay. For clearing, it does not get much simpler than just spamming the ice shot. In the background, the Herald of Ice will handle the chain explosions, and your ice shot projectiles will ricochet through entire packs by freezing everything in their path, so pretty much the screen clears itself. Against bosses, your rotation is slightly more involved, but still very easy to manage, so open by dropping the Frost Bomb to apply the cold exposure, then set up the Orb of Storms and the Lightning Rod to stack on the bosses. Then from there, we combine the Ice-tapped arrows and the Freezing Salvo for the maximum cold damage. Once the boss is frozen or vulnerable, then channel the snipe for a devastating burst, and follow that up with a barrage if needed. This combination absolutely melts even the pinnacle bosses. And now lastly, let's take a look at the leveling. So while grinding, you wanna start out with the lightning and the ice abilities, until the ice shot becomes available at level 9. From there you gradually transition into more cold damages as you unlock the ice tap arrows, freezing salvo, and the herald of ice. The leveling process is smooth, because the cold damage will unlock early. This setup is all about turning your warrior into a walking volcano by scaling ignite from massive slams and leaving entire packs of enemies burning in your footsteps. If you ever wanted a build that feels heavy, brutal, and explosive all at once, then this is it. The heart of this build comes from 3 key skills: Volcanic Fissure, the Forge Hammer, and the Stampede. Volcanic Fissure splits the ground open in a wave of lava. Then the Forge Hammer lands a crashing blow that ignites even the tankiest targets, and Stampede finishes off by making every step you take rip the battlefield apart. Together, they will give you an unmatched clear speed and boss damage that melts targets. What makes the build shine is setting enemies on fire. Because Ignite scales up the size of your hit, every massive slam you land will translate into a burn that continues to deal damage for several seconds. That means your Forge Hammer or the Volcanic Fissure is just not one hit. It essentially gets stretched over several times, and the bigger impact, the bigger the burn. The bosses that might usually take ages to grind down will start melting away as you rotate through the skills. And another important thing to know is that while many melee builds were slowed down by the armor explosion nerf this patch, the Fire Warbringer is still OP. Ignite scaling was not affected by those changes, which makes the setup stand out as most consistent and rewarding warrior build in the game right now. It's super strong for mapping, devastating for bosses, and it feels smooth for the leveling all the way into the red maps. So let's break down the skill gems, and your main clearing tool is the Stampede. And honestly, this is one of the most fun melee skills in Path of Exile 2. Every step you take will proc fissures under your feet, and once you've linked it with the supports like the crater and the branching fissures, it turns into a chain reaction of eruptions that wipe out monsters without you even needing to stop moving. The mapping feels incredible with this skill, because you're literally killing while stripping through the zones. For single target, you've got a rotation that feels deliberate and powerful, and against rares or bosses, you will start with Infernal Cry if you have access to it, because that weakens enemies and primes them for explosions. Then you slam them with the Forge Hammer, following up by the Volcanic Fissure, and finally you pop Ancestral Cry to boost your exerted attacks. From there, we transition into the Stampede until the targets burn down. If you don't have the Ancestral Cry yet, then you can simply rely on the Infernal Cry to fill that slot, and you will see huge ignite damage rolling over time. Especially for tanky bosses, dropping a War Banner before you start your rotation will add that extra push you need. And one quick tip here, keep your War Banner at a low level. Leveling it up increases dexterity requirements without giving you much more power, so you actually save yourself some stat headaches by leaving it underleveled. It's still incredibly effective, but you don't need to overcommit points into dexterity just to keep it online. Then for supports, the first place that you want to invest your quality is the Stampede, since that's your main clearing skill and it scales beautifully with the early investment. When it comes to the Jevels, there are two things to look out for. The new unique The Jevel Heart of the Will is a game changer by giving you both maximum life on a kill and extra fire damage. Then for rare Jevels, aim for stats like the added rage on a hit, increased damage against enemies with the broken armor, and even the block chance for survival. These will scale your damage while also shoring up defenses, which is the perfect balance for a melee fire build. Then next up we have the passive tree, and you want to start at this section and move into the clusters that emphasize melee damage, slam effectiveness and the Warcry synergies, since Ignite is our main damage source, so we prioritize the fire multipliers and burning damage nodes, making sure that every big hit we land translates into the sustained burning. Then physical to elemental conversion nodes are also key here, since they let us turn the raw strength into devastating fire output. Defenses are built directly into the progression, so maximum life scaling is everywhere, combined with strong investments into the armor and endurance charges. Endurance charges aren't just for defenses, they also tie into the warbringer synergies and empower your exerted attacks. This keeps you both tanky enough to stay in the melee range and consistent enough to deliver empowered blows every few seconds. The Warcry nodes are another cornerstone of the tree. The cooldown reduction and exerted attack bonus are critical, since our whole single target rotation relies on weaving the Warcry into the slams. By reducing cooldowns and increasing their effect, we make sure that our Infernal and Ancestral Cries are always ready when we need them. There's also room here for scaling AoV, which feels fantastic with the skills like the Volcanic Fissure. Bigger coverage here mean faster map clearing, but it also ensures that your slams reliably ignite every enemy in a pack. Then next up we have gear, and first and foremost you want to cap your resistances. The fire, cold and lightning will need to hit at least 75% mark, because without it you're going to get deleted in the red maps. For your main weapon hand you want to aim for the Soul and Maul. It is the perfect two-handed base for scaling those big ignite triggering hits. Then helmets like the Mask Great Helm and body armor like the Warlord Kuri Russ will provide the strength, spirit and resistances that you need, while the Bulwark Greaves will round out your defenses. Then for your offhand, the Swell and Shield is absolutely critical. It adds survivability, the block chance, and synergizes perfectly with defensive layers of this build. Then for rings we should get the Amethyst ring for resistances and damage scaling. Then for gloves get the Valmits and the Rawhide belt to provide that extra melee scaling, fire damage and the maximum life. Then on the amulet slot you wanna get the gold amulet, and make sure that you've got at least plus 35 spirit summer on your gear, so either way here or on your body armor. This one is required if you want your build to run smoothly. Then for affixes you want to prioritize physical damage converted to fire, added fire damage, melee skill scaling, maximum life and the strength. On top of that you will want the Soul Core of the Deity rune on your gear and iron runes on your weapons. These will push your damage into overdrive while keeping the defense very high. And finally, don't neglect the Jevels. At the heart of the Vel Jevel is the best end slot for sustain and the fire scaling, but rare Jevels with the rage on hit, fire multipliers and the block chance are just as valuable for rounding out your setup. And now finally, let's see how to actually play this build. The flow is straightforward but incredibly satisfying. For clearing, you will rely almost entirely on the stampede. Every footstep procs the fissures that ripple through the packs, and once you've got your supports online, you're basically erasing screens just by moving. And then for stragglers or tough rares, you can use the Forge Hammer or the Volcanic Fissure to finish them off. Then for single target, you will shift into a very controlled rotation. If you got Ancestral Cry, then your opener is Infernal Cry to weaken the enemies, followed by the Forge Hammer, then the Volcanic Fissure, then the Ancestral Cry to empower your extended attacks, and after that it's all about the stampede, until the target is dead. This setup is not just about the raw power, but about transforming the Fireball into something that feels entirely new, thanks to the infusion system and the Black Flame Covenant Keystone. The idea of turning the basic flame into a purple one that scales with both Ignite and Chaos mechanics makes this build one of the most unique spellcasters in the game. At its core, the build revolves around the Fireball, which is a skill that has existed since the very beginning of Path of Exile, but Fireball has changed dramatically in the 0.3 by becoming a spell that interacts with the new infusion mechanic. Infusions are temporarily elemental ground effects generated by certain spells, and when you consume a fire infusion with the Fireball, your next cast will explode into multiple secondary projectiles. So now suddenly, the Fireball no longer feels like a slow single orb, but more like a miniature of the Storm Bolt, by spreading across the screen and multiplying your damage in every direction. Not only does your flame now appear purple, but they also ignite as chaos, meaning that your damage over time comes from a completely different scaling. This allows you to stack chaos multipliers, ignite duration and the damage over time, in ways that the basic Fireball build would not achieve. The Blood Mage Ascendancy will tie everything together by changing the way that you pay for spells. Instead of mana, every cast will cost life. At first, that might sound dangerous, but the passive tree and the gear are designed to make it feel smooth. Your life pool is massive, your regeneration and the leech are consistent, and your spells will actually help you to sustain by returning the health with every cast. So let's take a look at the build, and the first thing is the skill gems. The Fireball is our centerpiece, but it only becomes the monster we want when it interacts with infusions. The infusion mechanic means that you need to support spells that constantly feed your Fireball with the charges of power. The Living Bomb is one of the most important ones, because it generates fire infusions instantly. By casting it twice before firing the Fireball, you guarantee that all the Fireballs will be infused and you will unleash secondary projectiles. Then the Solar Orb and the Snap will add extra consistency. The Solar Orb provides a sustained zone that constantly refreshes your infusions, while the Snap gives you an on-demand generation when you need so less most, by turning routine casts into devastating detonations. The flow of combat is built around weaving these spells together. You begin by placing the Sigil Power to ground yourself in the fight, then apply the Despair to strip enemy cast resistance and open them to your damage. You'll trigger the Living Bomb to build infusions, and then release the Fireball to consume them. All of this will create a wave of projectiles that ricochet across the map. The Chaos Bolt serve as a filler, by keeping your damage rolling when you cycle your infusion generation. It feels like a rotation of build up and release, and once you master the timing loop, it becomes the second nature. Then next, our passive tree will combine three principles. So scale Chaos infused damage, turn the life into your resource, and amplify the spellcasting utility. We start by getting nodes that boost spell damage, ignite scaling and the chaos multipliers. With the Black Flame Covenant active, all of your fire damage will become chaos, so every chaos node will become relevant. The damage over time multipliers, ignite nodes, and the burning damage clusters will all become key parts of your scaling. This dual interaction between the fire mechanics and the chaos mechanics is what exactly allows the Fireball to reach its full potential. Then the life investment is the second major priority. Because you are a blood mage, so your life pool is both casting resource and a survival buffer. The nodes that increase the flat life, percentage life, and regeneration will become more valuable than almost anything else. Notables like the Sangumancy and the Whispers of the Flesh will feed directly into this style, by rewarding you for casting and spawning life remnants that support your sustain. Recovery on the spell hit, life leech and regeneration nodes will keep the loop stable, so that you never feel like you're actually running out of life, despite constantly draining it. And then the final thing is utility. The Fireballs infused secondary projectiles only matter if they travel far and persist long enough to hit multiple enemies, so projectile speed and duration scaling are very important. Then next we got gear, and for this build we want to emphasize life, chaos scaling and the spellcasting efficiency. Your weapon of choice is usually a staff, which in my case is the Chimming Staff, which can roll very high spell damage, critical strike chance and the cast speed. The staff setup also enables very strong weapon swaps, by letting you carry alternate setups for the curse application and infuse generation. Then defensively, the Rapid Globe is a strong option for the life-based sustain, while the Snake Pit provides unique projectile interactions. Then Defiance of Destiny shines in the late game to give you extra layer of survivability. Your armor pieces focus first and foremost on the maximum life and resistances, because you're constantly losing life, so stacking as much as possible is the only way to keep the engine running smoothly. Then after that, the Chaos multipliers, spell damage and the cast speed are the offensive stats that you want to get. Jewelry is where you push your ceiling, so amulets and rings with the global critical strike multipliers, chaos damage and the cast speed are ideal. The Seed of Catalysm is a standout ring, while the rare amulets can push your damage even further. Your belt should focus on reinforced sustain, ideally rolling a very high life and the flask modifier. The flasks themselves are crucial for this build, as they act as an emergency recovery button when you get to low HP. Then for your helmet, gloves and boots, you should follow the same principles, so life and resistances first, and then whatever offensive bonus you can find. And now finally, let's take a look at how to actually play this build. Most of the time, we want to alternate between using the Living Bomb and the Fireball. Living Bomb will provide the infusion while the Fireball consumes it, and in 1 second the enemies will disappear in purple chaos. Then against tougher enemies, the rotation becomes a bit more involved. You drop the Sigil of Power to empower yourself, then apply the Despair to strip resistances, then trigger multiple infusions, and then detonate them with the Fireball. The Chaos Bolt will fill the gaps and ensure that you're never standing idle. Infusion generation is the core principle of where this build lies, so Living Bomb is your bread and butter, but the Solar Orb and the Snap will provide consistency when you need the extended loop. On weapon swap, you can carry a staff setup that allows you to quickly apply curses, by ensuring the nexts are always under the full weight of your debuffs. This DPS flow will almost become rhythmic. You drain life and restore life in the same moment, and fill the battlefield with a storm of corrupted fireballs. It's not the cleanest build visually. The purple fire, the explosions and the curses and the ground effects often will make the screen a chaotic mess.